Now, one of the most notable elements of the voyages of Zheng He is the way that it is commonly perceived as so fantastical that it almost encourages people to write historical fiction. Now, one of the most notable elements of historical fiction actually passed for a time before historians actually read it as a work of popular history. Gavin Menzies, a British author and retired submarine lieutenant commander who has written books promoting the claims that Chinese sailed to America before Columbus, made it to the New York Times bestsellers list. He was most known for his controversial book, and it's not really controversial so much as entirely a work of fiction, portraying itself as fact, 1421, the year that China discovered America. In the book, Menzies goes so far as to assert that the fleets of the Chinese Admiral Zheng He, despite our very clear records that they traveled entirely to the Western Ocean, from the perspective of the northern and southern courts, west is the Indian Ocean network there, right? Not Europe, it's the Indian Ocean network, but traveled to that Western Ocean from the perspective of China. Nonetheless, Menzies contends that Zheng He visited the Americas prior to the European Iberian explorer Christopher Columbus in 1492, and that the same fleet circumnavigated the globe a century before the expedition of Ferdinand Magellan. Now, this is not to say that the expeditions of Columbus or Magellan are extravagant, successful, notable, right? Columbus famously tied to the genocide of the Taino, literal sex slavery that he approves of and he's responsible for in the case of the Taino, although not himself, those under his command, just violence, pillage, so forth. And Magellan really just building off of and standing on the shoulders of others, patching together a network of ports that already were connected. Nonetheless, Menzies' book portrays itself as this sort of critique of Eurocentrism, but it's a critique of Eurocentrism based off of fiction. The second book makes itself more clear. The second book is 1434, the year a magnificent Chinese fleet sailed to Italy and ignited the Renaissance. Perhaps magnificent because historians have long known that the Italian Renaissance is actually to be credited to Arabic-speaking and writing scholars. Nonetheless, this is a hint at the pseudo-history trajectory that is emerging in Menzies' work. However, it was only with his third book that Gavin Menzies really blew his cover. His third book was The Lost Empire of Atlantis, where Menzies claims that Atlantis absolutely exists by 100% verifiable evidence in the form of the Minoan civilization, and that it maintained a global seaborne empire extending to the shores of America and India millennia before the actual contact in the age of discovery, as well as any other well-known verifiable sources. Thus, Menzies revealed himself as an author of fiction and not an author of history. Nonetheless, it is notable that this book, 1421, for a time sort of slid in there in the popular crowd, despite historians almost immediately knowing that it was not verifiable fact, slid in there in the popular readership as, new, exciting historical research. Sort of a fascinating phenomenon itself, but it shows the way that Zheng He can shape contemporary discussions. Another way that Zheng He and the memory thereof can shape contemporary discussions is the way that the image of the Baochuan, or the treasure fleet, was worked into the opening ceremony of the Beijing Olympics in 2008, which was this marker of the peaceful rise of the People's Republic of China. So it's incorporating that historical memory as an image into contemporary political contexts, and a very clever, somewhat propagandistic, But what isn't propagandistic about the Olympics in a fashion, right? We take all these things in stride here. It was a very clever presentation. Now, the perspective from the Chinese government of the People's Republic of China was that the Beijing Summer Olympics would boost development and peace, and the UN envoy to the United Nations from the People's Republic of China held this position, while the UN envoy to the Olympics in Beijing also affirmed that position. In an assessment published in April of 2007, there was a statement that the Beijing Olympics would provide a unique opportunity for the United Nations to promote development and peace-building activities, according to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Secretary Advisor on Sport and Development and Peace. And this statement was made on April 24th of 2007. China's peaceful rise is actually a phrase that is translated into English from Mandarin and is sometimes referred to or translated as China's peaceful development. It was an official policy under the People's Republic of China paramount leader Hu Jintao, who was General Secretary of the Communist Party from 2002 until 2012 and President of the People's Republic of China from 2003 to 2013, the previous head of state before contemporary head of state Xi Jinping. This policy sought to assure the international community that the People's Republic of China's growing political, economic, and military power would not pose a threat to the global community. China's peaceful rise characterized China as a responsible world leader that avoids unnecessary international confrontation, ribbing the United States and Washington there, emphasizing soft power as opposed to hard power. Keep in mind that this is during the period where the United States had just invaded Iraq and then previously invaded Afghanistan, when this phrase is gaining popularity. And it also vowed that the People's Republic of China was committed to its own internal issues and improving the welfare of its own people before interfering in world affairs. Furthermore, the policy of China's peaceful rise rebutted the China threat theory that was reiterated time and time again in British news media and picked up in American sources as well, a sort of widely discounted theory. But it rebutted this theory, and it also reestablished the view that the People's Republic of China was a non-threatening world power, as historically Chinese empires were regarded as less aggressive and less focused on territory, while more focused on trade. You can see the importance of Zheng and the treasure fleet here. In 2005, the People's Republic of China marked the 600th anniversary of the 7 voyages from 1405 to 1433 undertaken by Zheng He's treasure fleet, with nationwide celebrations. Then, the opening ceremony of the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, again pictured below, dramatized his explorations from Southeast Asia to the Middle East and the shores of Africa. The same year, in February, China's Ministry of Commerce announced that it was funding a 3-year project with the assistance of the Kenyan government to search for Ming-era vessels that had supposedly foundered off of the East African coast. Historical records indicate Chinese merchant ships sank in the areas around Kenya, stated publicly Zheng Wei, a curator for the State Museum. This also told China's official Xinhua news agency, "We hope to find the wrecks of the fleet of the legendary Zheng He," and this was widely reported in the American context by Ishan Tanur of Time magazine in 2010. Hence, we can see the way that Zheng He's treasure fleet has captioned the imaginaire of contemporary contexts, from political figures to would-be pseudo-historians, but would-be historians, I guess, but people who are pseudo-historians, like Menzies, and popular writers, I guess you could say, as well as the broader public and the international community. Now we're just going to reflect on some maps. Take note of Ming China on this map, as well as the areas and the ports associated with the Ming treasure fleet. Quinyon is Vijaya here, but also Ayutthaya, in the kingdom that was the predecessor kingdom of Siam, Surabaya in the island of Java here, Palembang, Malacca on the coast nearby what is now Singapore, then Samudra, and then Banda Aceh, Chittagong in Bengal, then Gale and Ceylon or Sri Lanka, and then Quilon, Cochin, and Calicut on the Malabar coast here, the Maldives Islands, and then up through the Arabian Sea and down Mogadishu and Mombasa, down through eventually Kilwa here on the coast of Eastern Africa. These trading networks knit together several oceanic and trading networks of the 13th to 14th century world system. The portrayal here is from Janet Abulugo from before European hegemony, the world system, which covers the 13th and 14th centuries. It was an Oxford University Press publication, but I just want to make a couple of additions here. Note the South China Sea and the East China Sea are a single network system here. Really, the East China Sea is one network system and the South China Sea is another network system, but of course the Chinese empires had access to both of those. There is also a third system out here in the Sulu Sea and the extended archipelago over here. Then you have the Bay of Bengal. This is a notable system here connecting the Malabar coast to Southeast Asia. The Arabian Sea, and then the East African and Madagascar network here. This Arabian Sea and Madagascar network is another sort of Indian Ocean network. Then the Red Sea network, and of course the Persian Gulf network. Then you have the vast overland Silk Road, the Mediterranean, which I would extend out to the Iberian Peninsula and out towards the western reaches of Morocco here, and then the overland European area here as well. So a few more to extend on this map, but you get the gist of the various networks that Zheng He's fleet is unifying through its voyages. Now in Southeast Asia, notably trade is dominated by the monsoon winds, especially from the 12th to 15th centuries, but these patterns remain essentially the same for sailors up through the present. The prevailing monsoon winds in the summer during July favor trade going from Southeast Asia towards mainland China. Then the returning winds in the winter favor travel going from southern China to Southeast Asia. And of course, in the 13th to 15th century, you don't want to go against those monsoon winds. But here on this map, you get a better sense of this South China Sea network, then also the Sulu and Celebes and Banda Seas. This is another network here dominated by slightly different monsoon winds, but same general gist, north to south, just flipping the northwest and northeast sort of bends to the winds. Then you have the Java Sea, which is quite notable. So if you could imagine this during the winter, one could go from the South China Sea through the Java Sea to the Moluccas and the Spice Islands, and then return in the following season. Similarly, through the South China Sea to the ports of Malacca, and then one might have to wait to go up the coast here for the prevailing season, and then wait again to go back down here to get to Sri Lanka. So one gets the sense that winds also are beginning to dominate these trade routes. Now, so much so for small boats, but also so much more so for larger multi-masted vessels. Additionally, if you have taken world history pre-1500 with me, you will have had a little bit more information about this, but there's really substantial state development in Eastern Africa and a development of trade networks from the very earliest periods of recorded history and archaeological evidence up through the period of 1500. These are also dominated by monsoon winds. So from November through February, you have the south by southwest winds, which go from the Malabar coast of India down to Eastern Africa, all the way to Sofala and Zimbabwe, here past Kilwa and Zanzibar Island. Then, of course, in the summertime, the winds reverse, and one could return to the Malabar coast. Nonetheless, this over time leads to the substantial development of, you can see Kilwa marked here, but a substantial early modern development of a Swahili maritime culture as well. So here you've got Dar es Salaam, which is a major city, but also Zanzibar Island, which is a major outpost here. But this trading system in Eastern Africa is quite notable. Thus, it's no surprise that Zheng He's fleet would attempt to reach this trading zone, especially since it was one associated also with Muslim trading records. Now I want to close here with a bit of comparison. We previously discussed Marco Polo's trip and also his return trip, which is noted especially on red here on this particular slide, going through Southeast Asia and then back if you buy the historical evidence there presented by the records that were recorded afterwards by Marco Polo's cellmate Rustichello. Nonetheless, I'd like you to compare this, assume it's accurate, compare this to the voyages of Zheng He's fleet. What do you notice that's similar? What do you notice that's different? Let's go ahead and get the discussion going.